Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Rob Glass, Superintendent of the Eastchester Union Free School District. It's my pleasure to be here with our panelists and guests tonight, and I want to thank everyone who has taken their valuable time to join us on this Zoom meeting. We're here tonight with the first of what we hope will be many in the future, a district-wide Zoom meeting where we can engage the community directly, provide information, and gather feedback. This is sponsored by our Board of Education and our administration, who are partnering together to put this together on your behalf with the support of our parents and families, who I know have expressed to us that they appreciate this kind of communication. So thanks everyone for helping us facilitate this. Also want to thank specifically our technology department and Bill Blum for helping us get this set up today. We should have room for multiple participants, many hundreds. I don't know how many are here yet, but I would hope that we have many participants today. The meeting is being recorded in case you know someone who's not able to be here. We want to make sure this information is available to them. And so it will be posted within about 24 hours on our website. So please look for that if you'd like to review anything or if you would like to refer a friend to see this, this session. So one of our goals this year in the 2019-20 school year was to try to do a complete study of our educational technology program. We wanted to understand how our technology, how effective it is against national standards for education, what kind of job we may be doing, and how we might better align our technology to meet the needs of our learners in the future. And so with that goal in mind, our Assistant Superintendent for Learning, who's here with us tonight, Scott Wynn, decided that he would, he took that on and worked with Jeff Sun of Sun Associates, who I'll introduce in a moment. And they put this program together, and I think you'll be very pleased with the methodology and also the results, knowing that we got some good information from this. Let me jump right to the introduction of the people who are with us here tonight. Jeff Sun of Sun Associates will be presenting primarily tonight, and he will also be with his associate Zora Warren, who's been with us every step of the way through this journey. We appreciate their work. Sun Associates has spent a lot of time. They've been on site a lot over the last number of months. Then we have Scott Wynn, who's with us, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. Of course, you know Scott if you've been around the district at all. He's involved in so many important things relative to teaching and learning. He'll be here tonight to provide some perspective and to provide some answers to questions you may have that would pertain to specifically to Eastchester. With us, we have our board president, Dr. Cheryl Smith, who will be helping moderate tonight, fielding some of the questions on the Q&A chat feature. And also on our Board of Education, Judah Holstein, he'll be doing the same. So as you're feeding your questions on the Q&A, they'll be compiling them. They'll be helping organize, perhaps clustering some of those and posing those questions to our panel of Zora, Jeff, and Scott. So with that, I think we can dive right in. And Scott, would you care to help us by introducing a little bit more information about Jeff?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Dr. Glass. You know, as Dr. Glass said, we embarked on this journey, and we were very, very fortunate to work with our partners at Southern Westchester BOCES and the Lyric to be introduced to Jeff Sun and Sun Associates. And they have performed this technology review with us. And just to give a little background on Jeff and Sun Associates. Jeff Sun is the director of Sun Associates. Sun Associates provides program evaluation services for a number of federal and state-funded educational projects, such as the National Science Foundation iTest projects, state and nonprofit STEM grants, the NASA Team 2, the United States Department of Education, the IMLS Museums for Museums for America and Community Catalyst grants, and many others. Jeff has over 20 years of experience working in the area of a formative, summative, mixed methods educational program evaluation. His firm works closely with LEAs to develop evaluation and assessment frameworks that examine the impact of innovative pedagogies on learning and the instructional environment. Prior to founding Sun Associates, Jeff was the Director of Educational Technology for the Northeast and Islands Regional Educational Laboratory. So we have a great person here, a lot of experience, who is going to help us. And Jeff, I thank you so much for your time, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, thanks, Scott. I'm glad to be here. I think that this meeting probably has one of the distinctions of having, as I look right now, and we have 73 attendees and growing, one of the better attended meetings to discuss an evaluation report that I've had in recent memory. We do this type of work all over the place, and very frequently the sort of endpoint of our engagement with the district is to present to school committee and school boards and talk a little bit about what it is that we found, because they're usually the folks who commission our work, as essentially is the case in this case. And typically we present to a horseshoe-shaped table with board members at it and a TV camera someplace, and that's pretty much it. But I'm pleased that Eastchester has turned out so many people who are interested in this subject, as much as Zora and I are interested in this subject. So, and as much as the district is as well. So I know that we're probably going to have a lot of discussion. So I want to kind of get the requisite PowerPoint slides done and out of the way. What this will allow us to do is to review the report as it existed and as we found, and provide the basis, I think, for further discussion and conversation, which hopefully will take up the bulk of our time. So I'm going to go into the screen share mode here right now. And there you go. That's so just a little bit, and this expands some on what it is that we've been talking about thus far already, and Scott and Rob were saying. The overall purpose of the study, as commissioned by the district, was to get an outside perspective on the status of the district's efforts to utilize digital technologies to support and ultimately transform the teaching and learning environment in Eastchester. This, as I'm sure that many of you know, this being digital learning, is something that districts everywhere have been moving toward over the course of a number of years. And this kind of structured reflection, taking a look at where the district stands with regards to research and best practice, and to some extent, offering some comparison to things that are going on in the immediate area and vicinity, is a very useful point for districts to kind of put a stake in the ground and use that starting point to propel their strategic planning efforts. So that ultimately turns out to be one of the purposes of what this study is. You've heard about Sun Associates. Scott also mentioned Lyric. That's the Lower Hudson Regional Information Center, and their work out of southern Westchester BOCES. So it's part of the BOCES constellation, and Lyric provides a whole lot of services related to instructional technology, such as software licenses and the internet service provision. They're the people who host, I believe, the Power School servers, as well as a number of other servers that Eastchester uses right now. And I should just also note that we have done this sort of evaluation work through Lyric. Lyric essentially just brings us in and lets us go, and we do the work that we do independent of whether Lyric brought us there, or in some cases a district will seek us and contact us directly. But we have done this for about 15 to 20 districts in Westchester County and Rockland County. So, and I think actually we've done some stuff in Putnam also. So we've got fairly deep experience in your part of New York. We also have done these studies all over the East Coast, we're based in Massachusetts. So that's where Zora and I are sitting right now, in different parts of Massachusetts. So very, very briefly, the process that gave rise to this study and the work that we are presenting here tonight started with Sun Associates working with the District Technology Committee in Eastchester. And that work was largely around reviewing literature, talking about comparison districts, taking a look at best practices related to digital learning. And out of that review and that work, which is sort of like a literature search in a way and a structured conversation, we developed a set of indicators. And these are, in a way, vision statements around how the district or the district committee that did this work would like to see technology supporting. We had 3 different categories. One is student learning and student outcomes. Another is teacher behavior and teacher skills. And the last one was the district and policy supports that are necessary to implement digital learning. And the indicators basically form the background against which we then proceed to go out, Zora and I in this case, and collect information and data from the district to determine to what extent is the district actually performing in ways that meet with its own indicators and benchmarks. In the case of this study, the data collection included observations. Zora and I were in every classroom in every school in Eastchester. We did teacher focus groups, parent focus groups. We actually got quite a bit of input from parents. Let's see, we spoke to every administrator, interviewed every administrator, and did a lot of informal teacher interviews as we moved around throughout the district. And we also did focus groups with students, not the very young students, but we did them for middle school and high school students. So we were able to get the student voice into this as well. And all of this is, as I said before, positioned to provide a portrait of where the district is right now with regard to its digital learning implementation around those 3 basic areas that we spoke of. And to use that where the district is right now picture as a way of driving forward planning. Now, one last thing that I'll note is that we did this work. We started in January or February, I believe, and we did the in-district work just as there was, sort of the rumblings that, we don't know how much longer school is going to be in session. It might actually, we might need to close the buildings. So we basically wrapped up all of our data collection by, I think, about the first week of March. And then the rest of the story as far as what happened. So to a large extent, our portrait that is documented in the report is a portrait that is a little cast in amber of the way things looked right up until the point that the pandemic closed down schools. We did do a little bit more follow-up in that we surveyed teachers. We hadn't done any survey work prior to this. And I can talk a little bit more about that if there's interest later on. But we surveyed teachers last month and were able to capture a bit of an image as to what teachers have been doing and thinking and concerned about related to using remote learning during this shutdown period. So we're not really shut down, but remote learning period. Okay, so that's a little bit about the process. So to dive right in, the sort of big takeaway from our study is that the district and the district community, and by that I mean the parents and students and really sort of the whole constellation, not just administrators and not just teachers, is really hungry for a vision around the role of instructional technology in teaching and learning. Zora and I feel this is a very, very positive thing. And it means that the district is positioned ideally to be able to move forward and actually formulate that vision. Now, the flip side of that is that there right now doesn't actually seem to be a strong operational vision, or as we refer to it, a big picture about what Eastchester is aiming to achieve with integration of technology. Okay. Here's a quote that we actually picked up during the more recent survey, but we think it sort of sums up very well the position that we uncovered and that which we hold, which is that there really isn't a cohesive vision. There's a strong sense on the part of a number of educators and also community members that technology is essentially being used as a augmentation or a substitution for very traditional instructional methods. So whereas many of us, I don't know how old folks are who are listening, but we went to school with chalkboards. Well, now you've got a smartboard. Okay. I'm not even going to go into the relative cost of a chalkboard versus a smartboard. Probably chalkboards cost more now because they're rare. But the thing that you can do with a chalkboard versus a smartboard is not necessarily much different between the two. One allows you to it's white, you can project videos on it. The other is dusty and makes funny noises if you scrape your fingernails on it. But if you're using them for essentially the same purpose, then what is the benefit that is coming from the instructional technology? So without going into great detail, there is benefit from using something like a smartboard versus a chalkboard. And we saw teachers in the district using them very, in ways that are beneficial, but it is largely at those uses are driven by what the individual teacher is interested in doing and has been able to access with regard to training and professional development and ideas and so on and so forth. Okay, so a cohesive vision would be something that would define direction around what teachers and for that matter students need to be able to do with regard to the technology. Okay, in the case of teachers, it's probably more about how the teachers knowing how to actually use and operate particular pieces of technology in an instructional environment in order to produce the types of student outcomes that they're looking to produce. And with students, it's more around what is it that students are expected to be able to do and learn with the application of that technology. Okay, because this is part of the underlying message here, which is that through the use of technology, students are able to do things and access types of learning and develop skill sets that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do as well if they weren't using the technology. And there's more to that as well, which is that there's certain things that technology, in fact, actually doesn't do a particularly good job of. And teachers need to be able to differentiate between those things. Okay, so teachers need to have the knowledge and the skill sets to be able to determine when is technology an appropriate thing to use here, or when is it time to put down the technology and use a different method. Okay, how teachers get that is through training and professional development. And the vision for the district with regard to digital learning would actually do something around speaking to, what does that training look like? What does the professional development look like teachers should have in order to be able to use this stuff? Going further, instructional and technical support. Teachers actually do need to have support, not just in terms of, my projector bulb blew out, where do I get another one? That's technical support. Or I can't get on the network, what's wrong? That's technical support, but also instructional support. So what is the best way to teach critical thinking through online research? Okay, what are these things that kids can supposedly do with technology that they wouldn't be so readily able to do without technology? Teachers need to have modeling, they need to have instructional support that can help define those kinds of things and help them develop those skills, and that's instructional support. And lastly, of course, the thing that probably many people start with, which is the infrastructure and equipment. You actually have to have technology in order to be able to use technology. So you can't come up with all sorts of nifty ideas about integrating Chromebooks into learning centers in the first grade classroom if there aren't any Chromebooks, okay? So obviously you need to have the infrastructure and the equipment. And what teacher is actually going to use digital resources if the network is down all the time? Now, I'm not saying that the network is down all the time in Eastchester, but you get the idea. There needs to be reliable technology so the teachers are willing to take that risk and go out and attempt to learn how to use it. So to break that down a little bit more, the district should have clear direction on how technology best supports teaching and learning. That's what the role of that vision is. We talked about this already, that the vision would help define what I refer to as the pathway between technology as a teacher tool and technology that actually supports novel or unique student outcomes. And that needs to be defined for teachers. Once again, in Eastchester, there's teachers who are doing that right now. They're pushing those boundaries. For example, the middle school inquiry courses, we think, are really, really good examples of teachers or instruction being able to make that connection between technology tools and student learning. Now, those of you out there, some of you may have students who have been in those courses, and you know that they're essentially STEM courses. They're terrific as far as working with students around STEM, but a lot of the pedagogical ideas and the learning ideas that are embedded in those courses could be things that would work just as well in a social studies course or a ELA course or a math course. Okay, so it's not just about, as one teacher put it, building bridges out of popsicle sticks. How could I, what would be the relevance of that in my English course? Okay, well, maybe there wouldn't be a lot of relevance to building, although I could come up with one, building bridges out of popsicle sticks in an English course, but that hands-on learning aspect is something that could be transferred to a different subject area. Okay, so once again, what this is saying is that we see some examples of some really good things happening in the district. We see that the district community, the teaching community in every school, the little kids on up to the big kids, are very, very interested in being able to exploit digital learning resources, but they just need direction and they need support in order to be able to do that. So in that regard, the indicators, and I'm referring to things that I do realize and apologize for, that not all of you necessarily have seen yet. This is all actually written in a full written report. That report for the broader community that is outside of teachers and administrators will actually be on the district's website tomorrow. The teaching community has actually received it today. So once again, I doubt that everybody dropped everything and read the report right away. But many of the things that, for the sake of brevity, I'm sort of whizzing by right now. The indicators. Well, what are the indicators? Well, the indicators are in the report. So that would be something that how you would actually be able to catch up with those and read those things. But we do think that the indicators are very visionary. They're very ambitious, and they really do a good job of expressing a core set of values around meaningful technology integration. So they're not about using technology for technology's sake, which is something that I always hear people, not just in Eastchester, but everywhere, saying, we don't want to use technology just for technology's sake. Well, no, you don't want to use technology just for technology's sake. This isn't the Eastchester, Technology Institute. The district is about technology as a tool, and needs to define ways that tool will actually be used usefully and productively for the bigger strategic outcomes and in service of the mission of the district. And we think that the indicators do a good job of starting that, but those indicators need to be shaped into a vision. There needs to be strategy built around those and employed around those, and ultimately action plans developed out of that to make all this stuff real. So just some sort of finer points for action. There are particular findings that we had related to teachers needing instructional support, and I mentioned that already. We do find that there really is not instructional support right now. So once again, teachers who know how to do something and feel like doing it are doing it. those who would maybe like to do something, they don't have the support in order to be able to actually fulfill their own interest and vision, and ultimately just kind of wither on the vine. And that, of course, is not productive and leads to the kind of the situation where some teacher does one thing, other teachers do something else, and that even goes down to some of the most basic logistical issues around using things such as Google Classroom. Some teachers use Google Classroom, some teachers don't use Google Classroom. Some teachers use Google Classroom in different kinds of ways. This is not about developing a mandate that says, everybody will have this screen color and they're going to have, exactly, their buttons are going to be in these particular places on the screen. But in terms of functionality and the purpose that drives things such as Google Classroom, there needs to be some uniformity. Professional development is one way to get there. The district has done over time professional development around Google Classroom. There's been a very good program that is referred to in the district as the Google Cohort, but that program, as it has been structured, and we understand that it's actually going to already, there's been talk about how it will be structured differently. Scott could speak to that later, but the model wasn't as inclusive as it necessarily needs to be. So one of the things that we've learned through the enforced remote learning period is that there's room for everybody to use Google Classroom, and a lot of people can be trained and at the same time. So I think that use will change and needs to be expanded. The infrastructure is adequate, but it should be updated. And yeah, here's a quote that came from somebody recently. So this is actually after the main part of our data collection. But it speaks to a teacher who has started to use Google Classroom, but is worried that when they get back to school, whenever that actually may be, and want to be able to do that kind of stuff, they don't have enough Chromebooks to use. And that speaks to a concern that we heard many times around not being enough Chromebooks. I actually probably don't land so firmly on there is not enough Chromebooks side of the equation as I do that feel that teachers don't necessarily have enough training to be able to visualize the variety of different models around which you can use the Chromebooks that you have. But I also do think that in some ways, until you reach a one-to-one environment, and I'm not saying that therefore you have to go to a one-to-one environment, but until you do reach a one-to-one position, you probably can't have enough Chromebooks. Okay, so I would be looking to ultimately augment the number of Chromebooks that you have. So that's a bit about infrastructure there. Moving on quickly to the end here, recommendations. So we did have a core set of recommendations. A lot of these recommendations related to the set of indicators around district supports, because we basically feel that until the district is able to step up and provide more supports to the teachers and ultimately students, that you can't really ask students or teachers to be able to do the kinds of things that the indicators specify for teachers and students. So it really kind of starts with building up from the district level. And the big piece there is leadership. There needs to be leadership around developing and implementing this vision. So there's really two parts there: developing it and implementing it. Those things, I feel strongly. I am a strong believer in collaboration, but I also am a strong believer in leadership as well. And I think that leadership has to provide the pathway and the supports for collaboration, and then the real work happens through collaboration across the community. There really needs to be instructional support, and that includes widespread professional development, but it's that instructional support that's going to make this stuff happen at the classroom level. Okay. And that there's a much longer story here that we won't go into right now, but such support did exist in greater quantity in earlier years in the district. There's a lot of talk about, I wish we had, the instructional technology specialists again. Yeah, I think that there should be instructional technology specialists. I think that probably the actual role of those folks needs to be reviewed and thought about in the context of the vision that is laid out. So, it's not just bring back so-and-so, but it is, bring back the role. I think that that's important. And of course, the infrastructure needs to be built up so that users feel valued and highly supported. Okay. So really, I just wanted to kind of wrap up with some quotes that come from the more recent surveys. So these are all things that teachers have said to us, and I just find these things actually very heartening. To hear a teacher say that they've learned more in 10 weeks. So this was we did this in May, so people had been in the remote learning mode for about that long. Than they had in years before. Okay. And that, here's a teacher who has grown very clearly in his or her technology use, but really enjoys doing things that they didn't necessarily even know how to do or know that they could do before, and are still hungry for learning more about it. Okay. And this one in orange here about forcing us to move forward with things that are uncomfortable, that's part of the change process. And I don't necessarily want to always speak of the current crisis as opportunity, because I think that that diminishes some of the significant downsides of the situation that we're in. But there are opportunities to be found in so many different places, and here's one. Teachers needed to learn how to do something that they hadn't done before, and now they're trying to do it, and they're doing it. And here's another person expressing their love of Google Classroom. We have found that just about everybody in the district who has used Google Classroom and has come into the Google Classroom universe since they moved into remote learning is loving it, and is saying that they're going to be using it in the fall or whenever it is that they get back to fully live instruction as well. And lastly, here's somebody I think expressing the same idea about you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I'm a little more optimistic about the fact that school will reopen than this person necessarily is. But, once again, they're going to be using it, and they have, built a knowledge base around, things to do with the technology that we think will be beneficial to instruction, even when everybody gets back. So that's it for the slides. I realize that there's, much here that has been kind of, zipped around, flown through, but I'll sort of leave it at that and hear what it is that people have to say.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. Excellent overview. It really captured very concisely a very detailed report. And I want to remind everybody that report will be available on our website tomorrow. If you'd like to take a look at that, it's over 50 pages, Jeff. So it's pretty right. It's pretty heavy duty, yeah. But there's a lot of good stuff in there. And for people who like to dig into the detail, that would be great, because that's what we'll be doing over the next few months as we figure out our way forward. But I'd like to see, we have over 111 participants. We have 111 participants and over 5 questions now, 6 questions. So I'd like to ask Dr. Smith or Judah if you would like to dive right in and pose some of those questions to our panelists on behalf of our audience.
Sure. Well, maybe Judah and I can go back and forth a little bit, and to the extent that a couple questions are related, there's a couple Chromebook questions we might be able to pull together. But the first question was just about the time frame for the study. So Keith asked, what is the typical time frame you usually have for this type of study? Maybe the subtext there might be, was it cut short because of the school closure, or did you have the amount of time you typically have for this study?
No, it wasn't cut short. We're really fortunate that the timing was such. Literally the trip to Eastchester was the last business trip that Zora and I did related to some associate's work. I think the only other time that I have left town after that was to go to Rochester to scoop up my kid and bring him home from University of Rochester when they shut down the campus. But we were able to do all of the data collection, under the wire. The only thing that we didn't do as part of this study, and there's a little bit of a longer story about that, and sometimes that it wouldn't have extended the time, but it would have extended what we had in terms of data, is that we didn't actually do a independent survey of teachers and parents. We did do the teacher survey, but it was limited to kind of how have things been going for you and what's one great thing that has happened to you since you've moved to remote learning. But we often do a full survey of teachers and students in some cases and parents. That would have added more depth, I think, to the report. But in terms of what we did have time, or what we did collect, we did not rush.
Oh, typically these things then, as I understand it, would take about 3 to 4 months, where you do your data collection, you do some follow-up collection. Once you're home, you start working on the report, and maybe based on what your findings are, you do a little more follow-up. But 3 to 4 months is about what you typically do?
Yeah, I think, yes, that's true.
Thanks. Thank you.
So I'll go ahead and ask the next question. There seem to be a few questions that are all circling around the district's Google Classroom and Chromebook mission statement. There are some questions about, we have some Chromebooks, and there's some questions about whether they were all used during the pandemic. There are some questions about whether the kids need Chromebook, and some debate that some of them have phones and have their own devices, and how that fits in to our vision. And so I'll categorize, there are 3 or 4 questions surrounding that, and I'll go ahead and pose that.
I just wanted to add, the Chromebook question also seems to be suggesting that this person understood we had Chromebooks like 7 years ago, and many of them hadn't been used prior to the pandemic. So were they being used fully, and that kind of?
Great. So, I think that question really circulates around, a main point from Jeff's report is, talking about a mission or vision is something the district's lacking around this topic. I think for years, there have been a lot of efforts to work with teachers to try and support teachers in their desire to use them, but I don't think that there has been that real cohesive push from the district. In terms of Chromebooks, from what I can see and from what I know, pretty much the Chromebooks that we have are in use and are used pretty well. I think that the pandemic, obviously we've been, providing Chromebooks to families in order to help support families along the way. In terms of phones, I would say that, a phone is a powerful tool, but it's also about this big, and a lot of work is difficult to actually get accomplished on a phone. So the better that we can provide Chromebooks to our students, I think the better off that we would be in the long run from an instructional standpoint. I think it's really, and I'm glad that the report brings to light this idea of a cohesive vision. I think it's something that the district has been talking about, but has not really pursued and implemented for a while. And I think this is the time to do so. And I think, like Jeff said, the committee that we have, and we'll be looking to expand and to get other feedback, really has brought forth some wonderful ideas about a vision statement. And I think that will be critical for us to move forward on.
So related to that, I'm just going to jump a little bit ahead because it's related to Chromebooks and maybe related to a vision. Is part of the vision, or is the plan, to go to a sort of one student, one device? Is that a long-term vision?
So that's a discussion we've been having. Recently we've been talking about what is the best kind of methodology for Eastchester? Is it that, we move to the district supplying, doing a one-to-one program for students and phasing something like that in, or is it moving to a more of a BYOD type program? And I think that, as the discussions have been kind of evolving, I think there's been kind of different philosophies that have come forward. And I think that's something that we're going to have to really think about and think through as to what is the best way for our community to handle that, given the different constraints that we might have within the district. Is it that we provide, one-to-one at the lower grades and then getting into the upper grades? Is it better to move to more of a BYOD program to get students prepared for college? And there's pros and cons to all the models. BYOD is harder to support, rather than a one-to-one program. If you have students in class that some have Chromebooks, some have MacBooks, some have their phones, some have, it can create some technical issues that might exist. But on the flip side, it opens up the ability to have, more devices and students that are committed to their own device. So I think that's definitely something that we need to move toward in terms of our larger discussion.
And if I can add, just, I've served on the board for a number of years. This is a conversation the board and the technology committee have been, for lack of a better word, struggling with for a number of years. The question of obsolescence of the pieces of equipment and all that kind of stuff surrounding the proper balance of BYOD versus supplying devices to the students. I'm looking forward to where we can figure out that right answer.
And I'll just, add one more piece to it, which kind of brings it back full circle. And not to sound like a broken record around this whole vision thing, but, I work with districts that are, that work in all of these models that are everything from, pretty much exactly what you guys are doing with not a one-to-one ratio and Chromebooks on carts to districts where, they buy every student a MacBook, a MacBook. They've recently, that one in particular has moved to Chromebooks. But the point is that I think you have to define what it is that you want to achieve with the technology before you start to get into, well, how much of it is it do we buy, and which device do we buy, and all those other kinds of details. If you don't have a good, clear understanding of what it is that you're trying to actually get out of student technology use, then you won't be able to develop a reasonable model of what that technology distribution needs to be. The easiest analogy is if you're going to go build a house, you really kind of have to have a good idea of, what kind of family is going to live in that house, and what kind of space do they need, how many of them are there, and all that kind of thing before you can, design the house. If you were, actually working with an architect to design a house. So, you've got to come up with the vision before you can decide whether you're going to be one-to-one or whatever.
I guess it's my turn. Bonnie Collar asks, I don't see any mention of parent concerns, particularly around the issues of communication and our ability to see more information about how our kids are doing.
So this goes to the, we actually do talk about that in the full report. I just didn't have a bullet on it in the slides. But I think that one of the places that I heard parents talk about this a lot in the parent focus groups was around PowerSchool. And the ability to see student grades and to have much more up-to-date information on student performance. I realize that there's more to communication than logging in and seeing your kids' grades, but being able to do that effectively and easily is something that many parents want. We heard it loud and clear, and I think, Scott, there may be some things that you can talk about related to PowerSchool.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, some great features within, PowerSchool is the larger, broader company. We use eSchool Plus as our our student management system. And yeah, I mean, those features are there. There's actually a number of features within eSchool that the district doesn't use or hasn't used up till now. And these are all things that we're hearing this feedback, and I think it will be time for us to begin looking at all the different possibilities of how we can expand that communication, how we can work with teachers and professionally develop them, and work with parents and provide professional development for parents as well in all of these topics, so that we can increase that level of communication as we move forward.
Well, maybe I can just follow up with that, because there are some questions that I'm trying to collect here about professional development. So one particular saying, that was a great summation, really interesting. How soon will teachers begin receiving the professional development support they need and standards they need to work toward? And I'll just link that with I saw another comment about, parents and parents also need development. So what are the plans? If you could be more specific about the kinds of support and a timeline of sorts. Is that available?
So a specific timeline, no. But I would say that in terms of teacher professional development, that's already happening. And that work has already started. I think that we, and Jeff spoke of this, our professional development model prior to me being in this role and to kind of the beginning stages of this has been, I'm going to use the word limited, but we could use the word targeted. It's been to smaller groups to provide professional development. I think this is the time when we need to start talking about larger scale professional development in the area of technology, in the areas of engagement. And these are all things that, we see as important and we see as necessary as we move forward. So, I mean, I can say that, professional development plans for teachers, both currently over the next several weeks throughout the summer and into the fall, are already in development. We're working with Southern Westchester BOCES, we're working with the Lyric, we're working with our own teachers. I think some of our best professional development comes from our own teaching staff. We have a very talented staff here in Eastchester, and we've got teachers who are very well versed in a lot of these tools and a lot of these practices. As Jeff's alluded to multiple times in the report, we have wonderful things going on here. And we want to capitalize on that and capitalize on the ability of those teachers to help their colleagues as well. In terms of the parent piece, I think that's something that we have to work on. Maybe we can foresee a parent, technology university coming down the road, or some other, possible ways to expand it. We can work with the PTA and some of our community members. I know we have a lot of community members who are in the field and who work, through these different skills themselves. So I think that will be a critical piece for us as we move forward.
Yeah. I think that you hit the nail on the head there. And one of the questioners said, I'm an educator and a parent, and it really helped me during this time because I was able to work with my daughter. So, you said best professional development is teacher-led professional development. Maybe there is a potential committee of parents out there who could collaborate with the district on helping support parents. Thank you.
Absolutely.
One thing that I just wanted to add about the teachers being some of your best professional development, I think that's very true in the case of Eastchester in particular. The other thing that I will add, though, as a person who works with a lot of districts and thinks strategically about just these issues, is that as you proceed to leverage those teacher resources, you will also need to, it's more than just sort of saying, okay, well, here's so-and-so can run a workshop because they really know how to use this thing. But you actually have to build the structures into the, teacher your arrangements with teachers in order to be able to expect that they're going to do that. Because yeah, sure, some people would always be happy to answer questions. Other people are going to, not have the time to do that unless you've actually, afforded them the resources to be able to do that. And that's one reason why we keep, beating on this instructional technology specialist thing, because, instructional technology specialists would never take away the fact that, the best resource if you're a teacher is often the person in the next room who you can, stick your head in there or go get a kid to run over there and say, get Ms. So-and-so to come in here and help me figure out how to do this thing. And we don't want to, get rid of that as, part of the teacher culture, but there need to be actual systems developed and put into place to address this stuff as well.
I'm going to skip a couple questions down because there are 4 or 5 questions here that are asking about the plans for the fall and longer term for remote learning. Some are mentioning whether, if, depending on whether we open and what the lockdown looks like, but even beyond that. And they've asked not just for feedback from administration, but also from Dr. Sun.
So, I'll start. The planning for September is well underway, and I think the most important piece of the planning that we've done so far has been in data collection, and trying to, and we're going to continue doing this, has been to reach out to different constituency groups to find out what has worked, what hasn't worked, what worked really well, what really didn't work well, and what are the things that we want to look for should we need to continue distance learning, into the fall or potentially even longer. Obviously we're all hopeful that we can come back and have face-to-face instruction and have kids in front of students, but I think we also need to be realistic about the current state of the world, and we need to be prepared for that. So, can I give definitive plans of what exactly is going to be happening in September? Most definitely not. We are not there yet. And I was on a call today with 25 other assistant superintendents from our neighboring districts, and I can tell you none of us are at that place. But I can tell you that we are looking at what we have done and what would be best practices should we need to do this come the fall, and what are the different development and the different pieces that we'll need to put into place in order to make sure that it is successful. At this point, we're looking at a whole different host of models that are out there, trying to figure out which would work best for our students, for our parents, for our teachers, and try and see how can we develop our skills in order to really get us to the place where we can provide the best possible, education that we can under the circumstances.
So people, not so understandably, people want the deets, right? They want more details. And so I'm going to push it a little bit, and you can push back, but people are asking, okay, well, you don't have a plan yet, but when will there be a plan? Is there a plan for a plan? What are you waiting for from the state? Do you know when that's coming? So people are pushing it a little bit, and so I'm gonna push as well in terms of specific dates or deadlines that you think. I know you don't want to say, well, by July 1st we think we'll have this, and then it comes and goes, and it's not the case. And we've had a lot of that in the last few months. But when do you think that these things are going to be happening? Is there any more detail you can provide, basically?
Sure. Hey, listen, I'm more than happy to kind of speculate a little bit, as long as people, are under the understanding that that's what this is. It is truly some speculation. We are somewhat at the mercy of the New York State Education Department, of the governor, and we're understanding and hearing that we should have some more guidance to us, hopefully by the end of June. We're waiting for The New York State Board of Regents has a task force that's been charged with studying this and really providing guidance and regulations to schools. We're expecting that information is going to come to us by July 15th. So I would say, as of right now, we're hearing that the state is going to ask us to submit plans to them for reopening of school by the end of July. So somewhere in that window, we are going to be, trying to really coalesce the best possible plan. What I can say is this: we meet every single day, looking at different models. We're looking at models for secondary school versus elementary school and primary. Those are different animals in themselves. We're looking at how does a model affect our parents, and how does it affect our teachers, and how does it affect our students. I think we're coming at this with the premise that face-to-face instruction is the best possible instruction that we can provide. And if we can maximize that to the best possible extent that we can, that is going to be our goal. But obviously we need to exist within the regulations that exist and the safety of our students and our staff members. So, my hope is that we can provide information to parents, as soon as we possibly can. I can tell you that we're not holding anything back, and we are going to continue to reach out and look for guidance and for feedback from all constituency groups as we begin to make plans. We should expect to see, all parents should expect to see a survey, a very small micro survey coming out tomorrow, Dr. Glass? Yes, excellent. Tomorrow, asking some very, very basic questions to know, kind of gauge comfort levels of parents around coming back to school. So, we're looking for that information in order to help guide us as we kind of wander down this path together.
So I don't want to send us off the rails here, but there are a number of questions here asking about, I guess, questioning the strategy we used for the distance learning. And I know that we've talked about the thought process there and why we've taken that approach. People are hearing about other districts that are doing more live time, more synchronized learning. I yield if you guys say you're not going to talk about this at this meeting, but there are a number of people asking. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your thought process and the strategy we took and how it's evolving.
Sure. I mean, I think everybody we've lived the evolution of our specific model as it grew over the time, and I can say that having looked at every model that every district in our region kind of decided upon, people are not wrong. They're 100% correct. There are districts that are doing more live instruction than us and less asynchronous instruction. There are districts that are doing less live time than us and more asynchronous time. The way that we kind of came about where we were was looking and having discussions with collaborating with our teachers union, with our teachers, to say what do we think is the best possible model that we can provide to our students. We took into account the issues of equity. I know that there are a lot of people who didn't fully support our decision in terms of kind of the breakdown of having both asynchronous and live time. There were some people that looked at the model and said, why are we not running school exactly on the same schedule that we normally run school? And I can tell you that we did look at all of those models, and in the time that we had and in the discussions that we had as educators, as administrators, as groups of people within the district, we settled on a model that we thought was going to meet the needs of the most of our students in the best possible way that we could. Did we hit it right 100%? I don't know of any district that hit it right 100%. But I can say that from the feedback we've gotten, a lot of great things came out of what we've done, and some things didn't work as well as we thought that they were going to. And that's why we're having these discussions now, knowing that there is a possibility that we will need to provide remote instruction in the fall. How can we? The real question that I'm trying to ascertain is, how can we better what we've been doing? How can we take what we've gained in terms of a knowledge base, and how do we move forward to provide an even better scenario for our children come the fall?
This might be for Jeff and Zora, and a little bit also for Scott and Rob, but people are asking for an idea of some of the specific recommendations that are being made that came out of the report, out of the study, and maybe concomitantly out of the reality of distance learning in the last few months. Specific recommendations to improve student engagement and outcomes. Any details on that?
Well, the specific recommendations, and once again, I think some of this would probably be, I'm not sure if the people who are asking this are faculty or community members, but when you actually get a chance to look at the report, you'll see that there are there's a whole chapter on specific recommendations. We tend to talk about them as sort of cascading recommendations. So we start with the need to develop the strategic plan and the vision that drives everything else. But working at a level below that, there is the need for a much wider spread professional development model. There is the need for instructional technology specialists. There's the need for a what's referred to as a scope and sequence, or something that actually talks about what students, and for that matter teachers, should be able to do and know how to do with technology in the case of students at particular grade levels. We also spend some time talking about something that I didn't talk about a lot at in the presentation, which is this concept of curriculum mapping, and those who work in the schools, teachers would know exactly what we're talking about. But that's the going through the curriculum and actually identifying the places where technology can be used effectively to teach particular concepts or particular units or activities and those kinds of things. Some of that work has happened in the district over time, but it's not uniform. It's not widely known or held by all teachers. There's another recommendation, and I'm going to pull this together in a second, but there's another recommendation about spreading teacher knowledge around what is available to use as resources. So, for example, we would hear stories about teachers in one of the elementary schools knowing that there was a subscription to a particular online service that kids would benefit from, but teachers at another elementary school, or the other elementary school where kids would still be able to use it effectively for even in the higher grade, they didn't know that such a thing existed, so they didn't have access to it. So there's this kind of need to disseminate knowledge and information about technology among the teaching population much more thoroughly. Where all of this comes into play, and unfortunately, there's no kind of getting away from this. And I see some of the people in the comments or the Q&A are asking this. It's like, well, why are we just talking about this? And, why don't you guys get to work on it? And I think that, because time's a wasting. And I think that, my conversations with Rob and Scott indicate that, well, yes, they know that. And this is some of the work that has to happen. It would have to happen regardless of whether there was, a change in the instructional environment for the fall or not. Okay. Some of this is even more critical now that there is a high likelihood that there'll be something other than, the way school looked in February of this year. So something, that says that, yes, this remote learning will be continuing, even though you don't really know that for sure, but it seems highly likely. You need to have teachers who have uniform skills. You need teachers who know of the resources they can get to, teachers who know where technology, particularly technology in a remote learning environment, most connects to their curriculum, which they are going to be teaching one way or the other in September. Okay. All of that stuff has to happen really concurrently with a fluid situation where we don't even know what instruction is going to actually have to look like in the fall. And I say we, I'm not speaking as a Eastchester person, but I've got other clients and they're in exactly the same position in other states. So this is a highly fluid environment. Would it have been great if you had done this work a year ago and, we're in a different place now? Well, sure. But, you play the cards that are in your hand, and these are the cards that are in the hand right now. So that's what you got to do.
Expand on that a little bit. I know you touched on it briefly in the report. There are a couple of questions about the fact that the BOCES structure of the Google cohort was, I guess we've evolved past that, I guess is what we said, right? And some discussion of not just internal technology specialists, but also professional development from consultants. Can you speak a little bit to the vision for the structure of what that professional development, where we get it? I know we spoke a lot about professional development already, but people are asking, where we're going for that.
So I think there's a number of different avenues for us to look at. Obviously from an internal standpoint, we have people that are trained. I think from an external standpoint, our BOCES is very, very well prepared to provide us with support in a number of different ways. And we can even go as far as going to, some different external consultants that are not necessarily associated with BOCES. I've reached out to a number of our, kind of fellow school districts that are, in the process of doing a lot of this work themselves, to see, who are they using, what models are they using? And I think this is time for us to begin looking at a large different, kind of array of options. I don't think this comes from any one specific person or one specific entity. I think this is, the ability for us to, reach out and use as many resources as we can to, tap into the talent that exists within the district already and help grow it.
Do you have, can you speak a little bit? There seems to be a sense of why didn't we have a plan, in April or March, and other districts seem to be more ahead in terms of preparing for September. And, so is the district working on, if we're back, just like in February, this is with some changes, this is what it will look like in terms of technology and learning based on what we've learned. If we're back with limited capacity, like they're letting 10 kids in a cohort in summer camp. So they might say students can be in school, but only 15 in a class. So are you planning for being entirely distance education? Could you give us a little bit of detail of some of the ways that you're breaking it down and how far along in the planning you are?
So we're looking at all of those models. We're preparing for the ability, from both extremes, of 100% in school to 100% distance learning, which in reality, those two are the easiest models to plan for. It's the middle model that is really challenging school districts because there's a lot of variables that exist that we don't 100% know what the answers to those questions are. We're looking at if we're limited to the number of students within a classroom, Do we have students come every other day, every other week, on a 3-week rotating basis? If we, are limited to, having the number of students within large group settings like the cafeteria or gymnasiums, what does that look for, like for all of those different, different variables? We're trying to take into account what is going to work for parents as well, to see what that looks like. So each of those models has different pieces that, and different pros and cons, but also different, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, different nuances that really kind of change how teaching and learning is going to look, both from a in-person standpoint and from a distance learning standpoint. If you've got students who are going to be in front of their teacher every other day, and then in distance learning every other day, that's a very large different group of needs instructionally than if a student is going to be in front of their teacher all week and then away from their teacher for a full week. So I think those are the kinds of things that we are looking at, and trying to decide, if we do need to go down this road, which of those models is going to work the best. I can be very honest to say, one of the things that, and this is actually the survey question that Dr. Glass is going to be sending out tomorrow, revolves around how many students are we actually talking about are going to be coming back to school in the fall. If the governor is going to provide the ability for parents to say, I don't feel comfortable sending my child back to school, I would like to keep them home and have them learn from home, that changes a lot of the planning and the models that we have. So that's the survey question that's going to be coming, is trying to gauge the comfort level of whether parents are feeling that they're going to be sending their child back to school or not. We can, if there's a whole cohort of students who are not coming back that we know are on distance learning, well, that changes the number of students that we're contending with in terms of being face-to-face and the ability for us to plan differently. So, as we begin to develop these, we're really looking at as many different aspects of the situation as we can as we make these decisions.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm just going to jump in and augment real quick what Scott had said. I mean, we're losing a lot of sleep over this stuff. I want if we look complacent or calm, cool, and collected, or like this isn't urgent, I hope you'll understand we're not getting much sleep. This is keeping us up at night, right? It's easy to look at other districts too and say, well, this one's doing this and this one's doing that. You're going to find that. And I'm trying to work, so is Scott with his colleagues, and leverage the wisdom of those around us, because we're all feeling our way through some of this. These are really an unprecedented number of, I hate to overuse that term, unprecedented, but in terms of the number of variables we're contending with, it's a lot. So before we, if we can narrow that number of variables a little bit more, then we have more information to share, at least within a range, and we can start to give that to you, because I know you're trying to plan many families. So just know that this is something that is of a high concern for us. And I think, as Jeff indicated, we're right in the same spot as most districts. You will see some districts come out and say, oh, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. But I think you're going to find right now that's a little bit more the exception than the rule. We want to make sure that we plan this carefully and thoroughly. And our first task is to get down to a couple of models. We can get down to 1 or 2 models that we think is preferred for that hybrid. I call it the hybrid option, right? If we're fully in school, we know how to do that. If we're fully out of school, we've had some experience with doing that, and we want to do that better if we have to be fully out and remote like we are now. But if we're somewhere in between, because we can only have classes at half capacity or something, okay, that's where the variables get really, really complex. And we're now getting to the point where we're hoping internally in the next week or two, we're going to settle on one or two of those, and then we can start having conversations about narrowing it down. Because as Scott indicated, we do have deadlines too, and we would like to try to meet and exceed those deadlines. But right now, it's the best information we have for you. We ask for your patience.
And rather than jump to the next question, I'm going to address some questions that really, in my perspective, were comments from parents, and it's related to this. So I think it's important that you guys are aware, as I'm sure you already are, but maybe some of the people who are watching aren't. We have comments from some people who are saying, oh, we need more Zoom, more synchronous time. We have comments from some parents who are saying, we're struggling already to keep up with the demands on the bandwidth and the equipment in our house. So I think it's important that everyone understands that as a school district, we have to satisfy everyone, as best we can. And it's not, it is a universal perspective we're trying to get with. And I think that's why we're looking to do these surveys, to get that feedback from the community, and these presentations as well. Which I think leads very well into Dr. Smith's next question. So I'm going to yield my time to Dr. Smith for her next question.
Well, I had two questions. I'm going to throw them both out there, and they have to do with things we haven't talked about. One is student privacy and technology. So parents concerned that you're tracking, every little mistake a student makes is somehow being saved and archived, right? And I think it is a real concern in terms of when all of their work is on a platform like Google, right? What are we giving up, and what is what needs to be done to preserve students' privacy? And the other question has to do with students with IEPs and remote learning, or just technology in general, because they might have very different needs with technology. So what are some of the work that's being done in those two areas?
So let me start with the first one. So as our district's data protection officer, that would be me, as a role, one of the many hats that I do wear within the district. I can tell you that both myself, Bill Blum, who has been invaluable in terms of much of the work that we've been doing around this topic. The district is extremely diligent in terms of its students' privacy, in terms of the data that we have. From an educational standpoint, I can tell you that our teachers are using that data to make sure that our students are learning in the best possible way. Are we maintaining and collecting and archiving student mistakes and things of that nature? I can tell you that's not the case. We are looking to build our students up. We're looking to make them into the best possible students that we can. And we are using assessment data in order to drive a program that meets their needs. It's not data that we're using to potentially, collect in any way, shape, or form to somewhere down the line use against them. This is an environment of growth and of learning. So I can tell you that from a data standpoint, we are a district that's in very good standing, has the most recent data protection policies in place. As a matter of fact, at our, I believe, next board meeting, we're adopting a new set of data protection policies that are going in. And, we are really looking to be on the forefront to make sure that our students and their data are safe and as safe as possible. Question number two. Our students with IEPs, I have to tell you, students with IEPs have been one group that I have just truly felt for during this time. All of our students have struggled with learning in this model, but our students. Our students with IEPs, our ENL population, our students in our AIS programs. These are all students who have learning needs and who have things that we may not be able to provide in the same possible way through remote learning that we have been able to within the classrooms. And, I commend my colleague, Dr. Urso, and her team, Erin McGee and Christine Mileto and Christy Garin, who have worked tirelessly to really work with parents to try to provide the best possible scenario that we possibly could have. Learning, sitting in front of a computer is not the best possible learning method for a lot of our students, especially with IEPs. And distance learning can pose a lot of challenges to them. So at the same time, there are a number of students who distance learning has worked wonders for them, that it has been something that has worked well for them. So, I think this is one of those situations where, we are trying our best. We are obviously looking for constant feedback from parents, especially of our students in some of these subgroups, to be able to help us in terms of, providing for the needs of our struggling learners.
Thanks.
So I will follow that up with some feedback from some parents who are expressing their, I guess, appreciation and commending on the teachers who have started, to use Google Classroom because of the pandemic, and to use it more and to share and communicate better than ever with parents. And related to that, the questions are: do you have any thoughts on things you've learned thus far, things we've learned thus far, on ways to keep that going beyond the pandemic and to facilitate that communication, and things you've learned that you might do differently? Is there anything you can share in that regard? Sure.
There's a lot. I have a spreadsheet that's about 6,000 cells deep at this point of data that we've been collecting. I think a lot falls into the category of professional development. I have seen some of the most amazing things coming out of our teachers, and we want to be able to continue that growth and continue that process. I've spoken with teachers who have said, I've learned so much and I want to continue doing this, I just don't know how. Well, that is where our next steps really lie, and be able to kind of expand this out and be able to capture even more of our staff, to be able to say, we've got some great momentum here. I think things that we might change, there are a number of things that, we need to look at to see, what has worked well and what hasn't. We want to look at, should we need to continue, distance learning in the fall? That balance between synchronous and asynchronous. Is, Google Meet the best possible platform for us? Or do we need to look at, potentially using a different platform or having a series of platforms? Some of the communication tools, some of the instructional strategies and the instructional tools that we've been exploring during this time. We're working with teachers to find out what really worked well at each of the different grade levels, and are there things that we want to continue doing that maybe we weren't doing in the past. So that's all a data collection piece and a kind of siphoning through and looking for those best practices. What's nice is that, we've got a lot of information to look at, that I think we can really quell through that information and say, well, from this, what's the cream of the crop? And kind of siphon that off the top and implement that at a larger scale within the district.
Cool, thanks. There's a few questions about vision, to get back to one of the very first things that you presented on, Jeff, that something that the district needs is a vision, this big picture. What is Eastchester hoping to achieve with technology infrastructure? So this is kind of a dual question. Can you speak a little bit more about what would be some of the elements of Eastchester's vision? I know we're working toward it, but also how does Eastchester, you said you've studied quite a few schools in the Hudson Valley and in our area. So how do we compare, you know? And in terms of vision, how does it vary for different learners, different ages? You know, does your report give examples from other districts, or can you offer that?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so basically one of the things that I've said to the excuse me, the committee is that that I don't feel that it would be necessary or productive for Eastchester to think that, you know, well, we kind of have to start from scratch for this vision. In fact, actually, the indicators themselves are text statements and multiple paragraphs in some cases that I think actually form the basis for a vision. And they speak, I mean, folks can read them for themselves when they actually get into the report, but they speak to things such as, I'm looking at it myself right now, how technology supports engaged learning, how technology supports the development of student skills, learning skills, and thinking skills that go beyond simply content knowledge. So things like collaboration and problem solving and inquiry and those sorts of things. And they speak to students being media literate, which I think is, I don't think the committee is confused about this, but we often find in the general public sometimes there's the sense that students are extraordinarily media literate because, you know, my kid knows how to program my DVR or, you know, something like that, or hook up the Xbox. But the fact of the matter is that students are often not very media literate in the sense of being able to differentiate between where information comes from, the value of information, the legitimacy of sources, and those kinds of things, which, you know, once again, we see as critical thinking skills for, I hate to use the terminology, but for 21st century learners. I think that, you know, we're living on a day-to-day basis with sort of firsthand evidence of a need for more critical thinking to exist in among the citizenry. So there's, you know, civics involved in this as well. You know, so all of those kinds of things are spoken to in the student part of the indicators. And I think that there can be a lot of distillation of that into the vision statement, or the vision that drives what drives the plan for the district. And, you know, once again, there's more to be said there about what teachers, the vision is for teachers around this, and the vision for the district to be able to support that. So a lot of that stuff is there. Where does the district stand with regard to other districts in the immediate vicinity? This is something that, whether I'm working with districts in New York or districts in Vermont, everybody wants to know. And it's the, you know, sort of driving thing, it seems like, in the review of these sorts of studies. You know, and the pat answer is, you know, some are better and some are worse, and you're, you know, sort of in the middle. But the fact is that I don't know that Eastchester has deficiencies in terms of its vision, in that I think that, you know, there's a lot of positivity around the use of technology for learning. There is a lot of examples of stuff going forward. What Eastchester has, I mean, you know, we're evaluators, so we have to use these sorts of evaluative statements. What Eastchester has fallen behind on is leadership around actually making this stuff happen in the classroom, around actually making definitive statements to teachers around, you know, this is what we would like you to do, and this is what we're going to do in order to be able to support you to do this stuff. There has not been a lot of that in a number of years in the district. And I think that the result is, basically what we find in the study, which is that, there's a quite a bit of disparity and lack of uniformity around the use of technology, and some teachers who, in fact, actually don't use it very much at all, and some who use it a lot. One of the things that, I'll just wrap up with this, that we heard time and time again as we were speaking to folks in the district is about how, and it was remarkable that it just kept coming up, that Eastchester used to be the model. Eastchester used to be the place that people went to around, Westchester County to see, how it was done right. And people felt that the district had lost ground in that regard. And that, at this point, other districts had moved ahead, were doing more, and there's a general feeling of, we've passed our prime. And I think that, there is something to that relative to other districts, but the reasons for it are, fairly clear. And that is that, while the district installed, bought a bunch of things and installed a lot of neat technology, 10 years ago, 5 years, well, more than 5 years ago, more than 10 years ago, actually, that investment hasn't been maintained. So, it is time to build up again. Are terrible things happening in the district? Absolutely not. Can much more be done? Yeah. So that's, I hope I got everything there.
Jeff, on that note, I'm just, I know we're at our 8:30 stopping point. We've been at an hour and a half. I think I'd just like to offer my thanks to everyone, but before we completely sign off, if there are some questions that we have or some comments, some final statements or anything that, really need to be said, we'd like to provide an opportunity for that. As you look at the questions and comments, Judah, Cheryl, is there anything more there that any area we've left completely unexplored? I know there are more questions than time always, but you take a quick look and just make sure.
Yeah, I am seeing some more questions about the teachers' perspective and how they're feeling about this both during and after the pandemic. But I think that's covered in detail in the report. I had the luxury of seeing it before the people who were watching us. If you want to make a comment about that, I welcome you to, but I think it's covered.
Well, that may particularly, Judah, refer to the way I saw that comment too, and the way I interpreted it was it may have to do with the more recent survey that was just done that Jeff referenced that may not be in the report. So, what's the point of view of teachers right before and then following the survey that you just did? So.
Well, I mentioned that, I think, briefly in my talk, but I'll just leave it at, and maybe, Zora can chime in on this as well, but, I was very impressed. I was impressed because I saw actually more in the second survey, more evidence of teachers sort of saying, yeah, I'm going to do this stuff. It maybe wasn't by choice, none of this was by choice, but, this is where we're at and this is what we're going to do. And I was, very heartened by that because, frankly, I've worked with other districts where that wouldn't be the case. And I don't know, because I haven't studied another district in exactly the same way right now, but there may be other districts where, teachers have sort of shut down and said, you know what, come make me, and I don't get the sense that that's happening in Eastchester at all.
Yeah, so when we did visit Eastchester, all the schools, and met with teachers, I have to say, the impression as we went from classroom to classroom and popped in and popped out is incredibly welcoming, and teachers really excited and engaged about talking about technology and the possibilities that were to come. And I think that really did come out in the survey following, the start of remote learning. And I think what was coming out was they were excited and they were learning some new tools and how to use them, but also, certainly that, again, that need for professional development, that need for the opportunity, not just for the skills of using Google Classroom or the skills of the actual technology piece, but also that opportunity and that opportunity to collaborate around, now that we have these tools, how is that going to enhance teaching? How is that going to enhance learning so we can move our students to the next level? And it's not as simple as just learning the tool, but it's that planning and that opportunity across, whether it be across grade level, across content area, but all those conversations about what is it we want to accomplish, what are the tools that we have, what tools might be out there that we don't know about yet that we can use, and that time to talk about that and make that cohesive plan to really move to the next level. And so it really is a much more encompassing process, but I think from all the feedback we were getting, though it's hard work, is that people are ready to dig in and to do that work.
Right. And, you know, and it's interesting to use the word enhance because, you know, I've been doing this, for 25 years. And we've always talked about this as how technology enhances teaching and learning. You know, one of the things that it's hard to kind of stop yourself in the midst of something and reflect immediately on it. But one of the things that I think is happening in this you know, trying time for educators and parents and students in particular everywhere is that, you know, we're not just talking about enhanced anymore. Some of the things that we had, you know, talked about as being enhancements to the learning environment are now necessary to the learning environment. You know, and I think that is obviously an opportunity, but it is clearly a struggle, you know, because people are actually having to do some of those things that in the past might have been looked at as, you know, wouldn't it be nice? But now flipping your classroom, as an example, you know, is mandatory under these circumstances. I mean, that is what teachers are doing when they're dealing with Screencastify and intermixing that with synchronous sessions. They're flipping their classrooms. You know, you don't have a choice about it. That's the way it has to happen. And, you know, as we get into some of these things that you and other districts around the country, you know, around the world, are going to need to be doing moving into the fall, those kinds of techniques will be, you know, all that much more important. You know, we're not just talking about turning a camera on in the back of the classroom and filming live classes. You know, as much as some people seem to think that would be something that would be doable, you know, I've done that too. Before the 25 years of doing this, I was involved in actually filming live classes and sending those out on videotapes or ultimately satellite broadcast. And believe me, you do not want your teachers doing that. It's rough. Now that probably opens a whole nother kettle of fish, so I'll shut up.
Well, I think that, you know, Jeff, that is a very appropriate comment to make because it highlights some of the struggle that we're looking at when we look at one of the models we would be having in the fall if we had, you know, some hybrid model of learning at home and in school, because you have to consider those classroom impacts. And some of the models work really well for one variable, right? Maybe for transportation, for athletics, or for parent schedules. But they, you know, the model would carry with it the necessity to make the teaching more difficult. So, and make you want to put a camera in the back of the classroom and say, well, can I do that? Can I really do that? And the knowledge that you've helped us gather helps us maybe eliminate that would not be a good thing to do, right? So, so thank you, because all of the knowledge that you have brought and that Zora has brought to this process has really been beneficial to our district. And we're very grateful, and we thank you for the very complete report you've provided and the summary you provided tonight. So with that, I want to just thank everyone who's tuned in, and I have just a couple of summary thoughts for our families as we sign off tonight. First, the vision statement that Jeff talked about not long ago, this feeling that we used to be and that, you know, we want to get back to that's in the district, I think is key. That really resonated with all of us. And that's where we want to be. That's why we originally planned this report to be a precursor to strategic planning, because it's time to revisit that whole vision statement at the district level. coronavirus has interrupted that schedule a little bit, but we'll be picking that up in the summer and fall. And this is going to be important information that feeds that. I want everybody to know that we need a compelling vision around technology and around how that affects learning in the district, and we need to revisit and establish a compelling vision for everything we do in the district. That is fundamental. And so please know that that is where we're going. So if you're thinking about next steps coming out of this report with regard to vision, that's what we will be doing. Next steps coming out of the report, you heard Scott talk about professional development. The planning is already underway. The feedback in the study and the feedback from families suggests that no matter what we do, if we're going to continue any distance learning or if we're going to be using Moodle more, for example, in our regular classrooms, or excuse me, Google Classroom in place of Moodle in our classrooms, we're going to be needing to have more consistency in how that works. And our teachers will be able to leverage our experience, and the training will be taking place, right away. Not waiting for a vision, but waiting jumping right in to try to identify some gaps we can close really quickly. We're already working on that. With regard to, a little bit beyond the plan and thinking about the fall, I can understand the anxiety. Trying to help you all understand that we're all feeling that anxiety and that urgency. I saw a comment in the Q&A about, mid-July is too late. I want to let you know that our final report is due at the end of July. Some of this information will be able to get out to you a couple choices or a final decision much sooner than that, so you can start to plan. But we want to make sure that what we get you is pretty solid, because that's important too. So even next week, I'm hoping I'll be able to kind of nail down some variables and get some information out to people. So our complete plan is due end of July, but we're going to be able to get a lot more information out to you sooner than that. We can vet this. We also have a technology committee that was established as part of this process. So we have already a group of stakeholders that we can employ to dig into the study and start talking about next steps. And that's going to be crucial. And we can have community members as part of that as well. And we also have committees at the board level that really, there's room at the table to have more voices there. And I think we're clearly hearing the need that we want more iterative and generative communication from our families on many aspects and fronts in the district. We hear that loud and clear. We have some immediate places where we can make that happen, which is within our Board of Education committees and with our technology committee, and places where these committees already exist. And so in our reopening committee, we would have some room for some voices. I want to caution everybody on the reopening committee with this time frame, our more likely way of getting general parent and family feedback is going to be through surveys, because one or two people on a committee could be helpful, but it's not going to be necessarily equitable or completely representative. So please bear with us. We know you've been thrust into some very difficult circumstances, families. We appreciate your support. We know you're going through a lot, and we know that we're going through a lot. And it's a very cliche thing to say we're all in this together right now, but it's true. We are, and we'll continue to work with you and to try to enhance, improve communication and participation as we go forward, not just with this, but on many aspects of district vision moving forward. So thank you. I'll open it up. Any final comments that anyone else may have? With that, I want to thank everyone. Have a nice evening. Remember, this has been recorded. It will be on the district website. Remember, the report will be on the district website. And if you have any questions, our email, we're easy to find on email or on phone. So please get a hold of us and let us know if we can be of any help. Again, Jeff, Zora, Judah, Cheryl, Scott, thank you all. And thank you everyone at home for spending some time with us tonight. We crested 100 participants. That's pretty cool. So have a nice evening, everybody. Good night.
Night.
Hi, everybody.
Good night.